The Rental is a 2020 psychological thriller. Really, it's a horror film directed and co-written by Dave Franco. James Franco's brother. You may have seen him in other movies like Nerve and Now You See Me, and even the remake of Fright Night. But this is his first directorial debut, following two couples being related in the fact that the two men are brothers, as they go to this rentable space, kind of like an Airbnb, essentially. This rentable space in the middle of nowhere for them to just relax and have a peaceful time on vacation, go hiking and all that stuff. And after taking some questionable drugs and doing some things that they ought not to, the couples discover some really nasty secrets involving the people behind the Airbnb, behind themselves, and then stuff gets crazy. So I didn't know a lot about The Rental going into this viewing experience. This is actually my first movie review in terms of new releases since The Hunt, which I reviewed back in March. So it's been a long time, and there haven't been many movies this year, but I would have to say that The Rental is probably my second favorite release of the year after The Invisible Man, which really captured my heart. But this movie was great. I really liked The Rental, and I think one of the reasons is I didn't know anything about it. That seems to be a common trend with me. When I don't know a lot about the movie, it surprises me in the right ways. So like I said, it's about two couples. Dave Franco's not in the movie. I thought he was in the movie when I heard his name attached to it, but he's not. He's behind the camera, behind the scenes, and I think he did a really good job, this being his first directorial debut. He had a great eye for getting certain angles and certain aesthetics that I thought were pleasing and also sinister at the same time. The acting is very good, and I think he led the direction quite well, it appears, at least in front of the camera, that is. And these two couples, of course, they're kind of blood-related in the sense that they are brothers, and they're just trying to have a nice vacation away from work, away from the hustle-bustle of city life, and they go out into the middle of nowhere to just retreat. But when they're out there, things start butting heads. People aren't getting along necessarily, so they try to take some drugs to get some levity, and it makes things a whole lot worse, and they wind up making some really bad decisions, and there is another third party on the outskirts watching them from the inside. And I don't want to really give too much away. I don't know how much I'm supposed to give away in this review. I don't know what was revealed in the trailer. But there are a few twists in this movie, and if you know me, I love me a good twist. But everything about this was right. The directing was really solid. You may have this opinion like I do, but so many horror movies make their characters really dumb, in the sense that they make choices that no right-minded person would make. But in this movie, they basically do everything that a normal person would do with the choices that they've made. Of course, there are some questionable choices that most people wouldn't make, but with that being said, they have to accept the consequences to their actions, and by trying to hide and cover up their lies, it creates even bigger holes that they have to jump into. And I really liked that aspect of the film. There is, again, I don't know how much I want to give away, so if you really care about spoilers, be cautious with what I'm about to say. But there is a serial killer element to the film, especially in the last third act of the movie. But to me, the real standout in the movie was the first and second acts, where characters are pinned against one another and they have to deal with their choices. That element was really fascinating to me. It was a very psychological thriller, the likes of which I could relate to Parasite, which was my favorite movie of the decade, separate video on Parasite, which was a great Korean horror film. But also 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is a movie that I haven't watched in quite a while, but I loved that movie, the Cloverfield series in general. But that, pinning characters against one another, who's telling the truth, was really good. And then, of course, you get to the serial killer element, and I thought that was handled very, very well. They definitely had some nods to older horror classics, and I don't know how familiar Dave Franco is with horror films, but there was definitely a nod to Halloween with Michael Myers in there. And there were some similar relations to an old horror film from the 70s called Tourist Trap, and I don't know how well-versed they are in that particular film, but I definitely felt like it was related in some way with it being a location that people go to where they're trapped and stuff like that. But long story short, it was a really good movie. The Rental was a very entertaining experience, a very dark experience. If I could have one critique of the movie, sometimes when things are so intense and there's no levity, it's a movie that may not get that many rewatches. Whereas you take a more fun, light-hearted, scary movie, for example, Scream, which has jokes in it, it has some levity, but it also has good scares. I could watch Scream 1,000 times and it wouldn't get old. But certain movies like this, even a really great horror film like Hereditary, I had this critique with Hereditary too, is that you can't really get invested into it that many times because it's just hard to watch at points. And while this movie wasn't as hard to stomach as Hereditary was, of course, if you've seen that movie, you know how intense that movie is. But it has the same effect where I like more fun horror, but I also appreciate the intense because I myself love to write fun and intense horror. And intense horror is hard to watch, but it's good, I think, to watch because it brings out some life lessons. And The Rental was a really good example of that. Overall, I'm going to give the movie a 3.5 out of 5 skulls on the R.I.P. Reviews rating scale. Part of me wants to give some of the plot points and writing a 4, but I'm going to stick with a 3.5 for now because I think that's fair. Dave Franco, you're not watching this, but let's say you are. Great job with your first directorial debut. Keep doing what you're doing in this. I'd love to see another one of these psychological horror films from this same crew. I think they did a great job. And yeah, The Rental, really good movie. I don't know if you have theaters open in your area, but if you do, this might be one to check out for you. Just saying. Thank you for watching, and remember, as always, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer.